My family and I are currently going through a very rough patch in our lives, and we just lost our father. But my sister-in-law, who seems to be celebrating while we're mourning, is going about spreading the news that her husband, which is my younger brother, William, is going to inherit the mansion that our father left behind, and my younger brother is turning a blind eye to her actions, just as he always has. I come from a family that was originally four. It was my father, my mother, me, and my sister Sandra, until my brother William came into the picture. William is the only child of my father's brother. His parents had lost their lives in an accident when he was just 3 years of age, and he was taken to live with his grandparents. William's parents were not as successful as my father, so there was nothing for him to inherit. My father knew my grandparents were old and were not adequate to take care of a William, so he decided he was going to bring him to live with us, and my sister and I were asked to be welcoming, and that is what we did. We received and treated William like he was part of the family, and you could not find anything suggestive of the fact that he was not. This was how William grew into wealth, and that he was not originally a part of. Williams looked up to me like an older brother, and we did everything together. I was always looking out for him. I was in my 3rd year of college when he was about to enter, and my parents had wanted to get him an apartment, but he refused, and he insisted on staying with me, and we lived together in peace. During my 1st year in college, William and I discussed starting a business together after graduation. I was looking up to it, to be honest, but things went awry between the both of us, and this is because the devil disguised as a lady called Lauren was between the both of us. Lauren is proof that a woman is strong enough to tear down a family that shares a very strong bond. Lauren crossed paths with us during William's 2nd year in college, and I discovered that William was now making certain decisions without consulting me. Though I respected his decision as an adult, I was somewhat sad because I knew he would normally tell me about these things in the past. It was clear that he was now being influenced by somebody else, and I knew it was Lauren from the very moment he brought her to me. She was dominating, and wanted to have her way no matter the cost. The relationship was not okay with me because the influence that she had on him was very dangerous. She was practically manipulating him, and I had to intervene. This was not me being a busybody. Oh no, I was looking out for him like I always did. William reacted terribly to my advice about Lauren, and it was the first time in all these years that we lived as brothers that he would speak to me in such a tone. First, he was hiding things from me, and now he's disrespecting me. I apologized to him and decided I was going to turn a blind eye to whatever he did from then on. To my amazement, William went home the next day without informing me. My sister Sandra was the one who called me on the phone that same day to ask Williams if, I were having problems between us. I thought he might have called to report me to my parents, but that was not the case. No, Sandra informed me that Williams was currently at home and that he was demanding that my parents give him money to rent out his apartment. My parents, who knew how close William and I have always been, suspected that there must be a problem, especially with William stating that the both of us had outgrown the single apartment that we shared. I explained to Sandra what really happened, and she was not pleased with the fact that William had let a woman whom he barely knew come into our relationship. She wanted to confront him and talk some sense into him, but I stopped her from doing so. I did not set my eyes on my brother for the next 2 weeks, and this was because I remained at home until my parents had given him the money to get a new apartment. I saw him when he came to take his belongings, and guess who was right beside him? Lauren. He did not say a word to me. He just got into the house with his lady, and they began getting his belongings. I did not let that issue build resentment towards me and my brother. However, I just decided I should probably keep my distance from him just to avoid any form of insults from his end. I graduated from college before William, and I went ahead to get a job. I planned on saving up so I could push further with the business idea that we both had years ago. We were not what you would call Tight buddies? Not really. But I was also looking for a business partner and not a buddy. I worked and did some savings, but I stayed at my parents' home as it was spacious and they were not mounting pressure on me to leave. William graduated a few years later, and I decided it was time we kick-started the idea we had years ago. I approached him about it, but he said he was no longer interested. He claimed the idea, which would have been lucrative if we had put it into motion years ago, would not yield the exact same results. I took William's response as advice and pushed aside the thoughts of turning the business plan into an actual reality. What I never knew was that my brother had other plans of his own. My father summoned us during the same period and asked what vision William and I had for ourselves. There was no plan for me. I was working. I would get married when I was comfortable enough to do so. If I got to William to speak, he began talking about how he had to take a survey and made some discoveries that he planned on capitalizing on to not just make money, but to make an impact in society that would outlive him. My father just began nodding his head as a sign that he was pleased with what my brother had said so far. William continued talking about how his survey had provided him with the knowledge that most of the high school graduates who did not continue further in their educational pursuits were because they were hindered by funding, or they're now nuisances in society and possessed great skills that could be harnessed if given the right opportunity. William noted that he planned on creating a platform that would go after these individuals, identify their skills or talents, and empower them by setting up a business in line with their skills. He would take 70% of the profits, though. William wrapped up his talk by noting that his project was very long-term and required a lot of funding. He told my dad he had started saving and would not let his idea go to waste. Well, not gonna lie, my dad, he was impressed, and he could not hide it. I guess you're impressed too, right? Well, I was not, and this was not because I was jealous. His idea's great. But the problem is that it isn't his. It was the very same idea we've agreed upon to bring to life a few years ago when we were still in college. He's a thief! My father started commending William for not just aiming for money, but aiming to make the world a better place one step at a time. He promised to support him financially. William thanked my dad and refused to look in my direction, and after making me cast the idea aside, he was now making plans to execute it. I held myself together and refused to create a problem right there. I confronted him later about his backstabbing, and he said he was free to go in any venture without getting me involved. William had begun acting like we were in some form of competition, and he wanted to win the trophy for the better son. And I told our sister about what happened, and she wanted to go straight to us, but I stopped her. There's no point in getting him upset over it. I was yet to recover from the pain of William's betrayal when he threw another punch in my direction. William gathered my family together on a Saturday by informing us that he had a very important decision to make. I initially did not know what it was, but the moment I saw Lauren come to the house, I suspected what it could be. We were all seated, and William started his thanking of our parents for everything that they've done. He then announced to us that he would be moving out of the house and getting married to Lauren. They were already engaged. Well, this was just a year after he had graduated from college. Yeah, he recently got a job, but he was not financially stable enough to stand on his own. Besides, even if he wanted to get married, Lauren was the first person he ought to consider marrying. I knew deep down that she was the one fueling him. I wanted to mind my business, so I just kept my mouth shut, but Sandra, who's always been outspoken, asked William why he was rushing into marriage when he had just graduated from college and still needed to gain some ground financially. Sandra's question provided the platform for William to embarrass both of us. See, William started by saying most people who have regrets in life do so because they wait for the time when they'll be filthy rich before they start living. Something that usually never happens, according to him by statistics. He said that an individual who was too eagerly work hard and ensure they transitioned from the phase of dependency on parents to being independent This he termed was the hallmark of maturity. The way he stressed certain words and looked at Sandra and me while he spoke showed that he just wanted to look for trouble. And Sandra, who had condoned his stinky attitude all along, had plenty to give. She almost created a scene right then and there, if not for the fact that my father had intervened and rebuked her. Our father noted that William had the right to make his decision as he saw fit, and he went on to say that William said he was ready for marriage, and neither my sister nor I seemed too antagonistic about it. Besides, he had gotten married to our mother when he was younger than William, and he was independent earlier than that as well. William went on to get married to Lauren, and they had a lavish wedding ceremony. I'm sure this was not the money William saved up. Oh no, he did not save up such an amount needed. Even the money that our father had given him to support his business idea could not cover the lavish wedding. The real torment started after the wedding ceremony. Lauren and Williams would post their wedding photos or pictures of the expensive place where they were vacationing on Facebook, and they would tag it Independent Couple Goals, or something stupid that was meant to humiliate the likes of Sandra and me, who were unmarried and living in their parents' house. My father, he had a heart attack, though. About 3 months after William's wedding, we rushed him to the hospital where he spent 2 weeks. My sister and I reached out to William to let him know of the situation, but he did not come to visit, not even once. I suspected he was avoiding the situation where my mother would inquire to know how his vision of impacting society was playing out. He did not want to tell them that he had used up the money that my father had given him as a means of support. We just ignored his absence. We were too concerned about father's health to even care. Our father was finally stabilized and discharged to go home. The doctor, however, warned that he needed to be taken care of very well, and we did all we could, but the situation worsened a few days later, and my father found himself back at the hospital. This time around, it was critical, and the doctors were fighting to save his life. William and his wife Lauren showed up at the hospital and just acted like they cared about what was going on. William had the guts to accuse Sandra, Mom, and I of not taking good care of our father as the doctor had said, and that was why he was back at the hospital fighting for his life. I challenged him right then and there at the hospital because he had no right. I called him hypocrite for making such accusations at us when neither he nor his wife showed up to sympathize with our father when he initially fell sick. Lauren immediately cut me halfway off by saying she and William were both busy trying to run their family, and Sandra and I would understand that if, I needed time and commitment if only we had one for ourselves. Her comment shot my anger through the roof, and the fact that William kept quiet made it all worse. I wanted to react right there, but it was the hospital, so I just had to put my emotions in check. Sandra did not care. She gave Lauren a dirty slap, and a fight ensued with William and me trying to separate both parties. I stopped Sandra from fully expressing her anger, but that did not stop her from teaching Laura a lesson about respect. The security guard who was called upon once the fight broke out ordered us to leave the premises as a result. We were about to leave the hospital with the two ladies still trading insults when the doctors called us back. He gave us the news of our father passing away. The news of my father's demise just doused the tension in the air, and Sandra and my mother began to weep. Even William was touched, and I felt like collapsing, and I would have were it not for the fact that I had to be the man and comfort everyone. Lauren, on the other hand, just looked emotionless. We all went back to the family home where we received visitors and sympathizers. William walked up to me later on to say that he and his, jerk of a wife were taking their leave, and I knew then and there that trying to get my brother to make some sense was an absolute exercise in futility. How can someone who just claimed to be sane abandon his mother the very day her husband passed away? The house was too big and it was on a weekend, so There was just no acceptable reason. I did not ask him to stay or go. I only told him that our mother needed him at this time and that it would be wicked to just abscond. He did not argue about what I've said, but he noted that his wife too needed him, as he wanted to take her to see the doctor after Sandra had inflicted some bruises on her. William took his leave, but they promised to keep in touch to know about the burial proceedings. It is a week until my father's burial, and William and his wife Lauren are staying at the house till the burial ceremony's over. For a family that just lost their father, the quarreling has been high. I decided to put aside the resentment I felt towards my brother and his wife so we could at least bury our father in peace, giving outsiders the notion that we were not united. Lauren did not make matters easy for me. However, she and Sandra have refused to see eye to eye. This was all Lauren's fault. I don't know what the issue was between her and Sandra, but they fought this morning, and I came in and heard Lauren asking Sandra to start looking for an apartment as she would no longer be accommodated in the house once we had buried our father and, well, the will was read. She claimed her husband was in, quote, good books for our late father, and the one to inherit the mansion and some other properties as well, as he had proven to our late father that he was competent. Well, to start with, I cannot emphasize enough how stupid and insensitive it is for Lauren to be making such a statement when the owner of the house is yet to be laid to rest. This is a woman who was married into the home, so she should not be acting in this manner. I asked William to keep his wife on a leash while I pleaded with Sandra to avoid problems just until we buried our father. We can all resume the fighting after that because I don't plan on taking any more trash from my brother and his wife. Update number 1. I just threw my brother and his wife out of the home, and they deserved every bit of it. This update's coming after my father's burial. Before my father was laid to rest, there was an open casket period, which allowed everybody to see him one last time. I watched as everyone who took a long look into the coffin broke down in tears, and you had to be a wicked fellow to not cry. Even if you never knew my father, the tears of those around you were enough to provoke you. My feeling of pain immediately transitioned into anger as I watched Lauren go past my father's casket. There was no display of pain whatsoever. You would not be wrong to say she was happy. Well, what could I do? It's not an offense to not mourn. I mean, my father was buried and sympathizers kept on coming to pay their sympathy, and Lauren began carrying herself about the house like she was the lady in charge. Some of the sympathizers became uncomfortable and had to take their leave as a result of Lauren's attitudes. I knew Sandra was irritated and could snap at Lauren at any point in time, so I decided to talk to Lauren discreetly for her to straighten up and thereby avoid a confrontation with Sandra, which would create a scene with the guests around, and I just began to talk to Sandra respectfully, but she turned around and walked away from me while claiming I was just talking trash as she was the soon-to-be lady of the house and could not be told what to do. I held myself together. It was not the right time to deal with Lauren. Lauren and William approached me a few minutes later. William said his wife wanted to know when the will would be read so they could prepare ahead of time. And each time I felt like I had seen the level of my brother's stupidity and the depth of his manipulation, they just turned around and surprised me even further. I looked at William and all I could see was a puppet. I began creating a scene that I was trying so hard to avoid by shouting at William for allowing his wife to turn him into a self-centered idiot. Sandra and my mother came to the scene. And my mother, who tried to contain the issue, got irritated when she learned what Lauren had said and done, and she reprimanded Lauren and told William to take back the reins of his marriage, as it was not clear who the leader was in our home. The matter that was supposed to be contained now escalated with Lauren, telling my mom that she had initially wanted to let her stay in the house even though she would vacate the master bedroom for her husband and her, but she had changed her mind with what my mother had said. She asked my mother to start looking for an apartment before the will was read. Without getting a second thought, Sandra pounced on Lauren right then and there and started dragging her out of the house by the hair. William wanted to defend his wife as usual, but I teamed up with Sandra. We succeeded in throwing the couple out, and I told William that the reading of the will was going to be in 3 days, and that was when they had permission to show their face, and only then. I, however, noted to them that once the will was read, that they were to stay away from us for life. Update number 2. My sister-in-law, Lauren, is now the house cleaner. I know this is not the kind of thing you were expecting to hear, but I'm glad to get to the point. After my brother William and his wife were humiliated 3 days ago, they swore they would kick us out of the house once the will was read. I wasn't bothered. I was willing to face the outcome of the reading of the will, and the will was read today, and they both showed up in grand style. We were all seated with a lawyer awaiting the arrival when we saw the company van, which they had hired to pack their belongings, driving right into the compound, and their actions showed that they had great confidence that William would get the mansion. The so-called independent couple impatiently walked into the house without greeting anyone, and William requested that the lawyer hurries up with the process, and the lawyer went straight into the business of the day and began reading out the will. He noted that besides the house and 2 cars that our father left behind, there was also a sizable amount of money in his account. Sandra got 15% of the money. William received 10%, and my mother got 25%, while I was given the remaining 50%. The quote independent couple did not complain about the result so far. The gap in percentage between William and me did not seem to be an issue, as they expected a worthy compensation. The mansion. The lawyer went ahead to announce that my mother and sister had gotten both cars, while the house was given to me. Lauren and my brother could not believe what they heard. They both reacted and claimed that they, had altered the will by me, as there was no possible way William would have gotten just 10% of the money that our father had left behind. Lauren, who had been expecting to be named Madam of the house, immediately suggested to my brother that they contest the will, as he was the rightful owner. The lawyer was trying to make my brother and his wife see that the will that had been read was that, the name said it was my father's will on how his property was to be shared. My brother and his wife refused to listen to the voice of reason, and that was when Sandra said, he ought to be grateful he was given anything out of the wealth to which he wasn't even entitled to, as he wasn't even part of the family. William looked at Sandra like she was trying to make one of those offensive comments, but she continued by telling him that he was just an adopted boy who grew up into wealth when his background was nothing more than poverty. Well, that news hit William, and Lauren harder than the property division itself. He looked at my mother for confirmation, and she did so with further information that I've never known. Guys, listen. Besides the fact that William's parents had died poor, he was the product of a different marriage. His mother was a single mom when his dad met her. The independent couple's hope was shattered, and they were stranded. I immediately asked them to leave my house, and they began pleading that, please let him stay, at least till the paperwork was over and 10% of my father's money was sent to his account. I gave a condition that I would allow them to be there if Lauren would be the server of the house. Au the contraire, she was to be the housekeeper for all the days of their stay. They had to accept it because they didn't have a choice. William had quit his job in the hopes of coming to take over the house and some money, and the company that was hired was waiting outside to offload their goods, so that's how loud Lauren turned to my housekeeper. Update number 3. Hey guys, so the independent couple fought this morning, and from what I saw, they would soon be going their separate ways. I'm currently making this update from my workplace, and I know you would expect that since I've inherited a fortune. I would go about living life lavishly like my brother or adopted brother. I still have my job. I still live with my mother and sister, and ever since Lauren took up the position of housekeeping, the entire house has been a mess. I'm sure she was eagerly looking forward to the day when the paperwork would be done so they could leave. Sandra did not make it easy for her. She ensured that she tormented her in every way she could think of, and Lauren had no option but to swallow it. I soon confronted her about her lazy attitude towards cleaning the house, and she promised to sit up. William walked up to me a few minutes later and said his wife was pregnant, and I knew it was either a lie she concocted or something they both came up with to make her off the hook. I asked William to help his wife out if he felt the pregnancy was going to be a hindrance to her cleaning. I promised to kick them out the very instant she failed in doing her job. The paperwork would be finally processed in just a few days, but the quote independent couple had a serious fight this morning, with Lauren threatening to leave. Me and Mom and Sandra were all drawn to the scene as both William and his wife traded insults. I was surprised at the kind of words Lauren said to William. She called him an unfortunate jerk who had deceived her into spending a few years of her life with him for absolutely nothing. Well, she was right in calling William a jerk because, well, his mother was a single woman and the identity of his father was not even known. We did not get involved in their case, though. We just enjoyed the show. I wish I had popcorn. I could not wait around, however, for it to come to an end as I needed to go to work. I plan on getting the full gist when I return home this evening, and I will waste no time in giving you guys an update. One thing I'm certain of is that this whole thing will not end well for them. Update number 4. During my last update, I noted that things would not end well for the independent couple, and they have not. I got back home yesterday, and neither William nor his wife Lauren were here. I inquired what the matter was, and they said that Lauren had noted that she was done wasting her life with someone who had nothing to offer, and she left the house with a few of her stuff. They said William went after her and had not returned since, and we were still discussing and laughing over the whole ordeal when William walked into the house looking dejected and tired of life. None of us asked him about the issue, as we were not interested, but he suddenly went down on his knees, began to ask for forgiveness. He was not just asking for forgiveness, he was basically asking for assistance, and he had a very interesting backstory. He noted that the money that he had, Lauren had spent on their expensive wedding and honeymoon was not just that, which my father had given him. He said Lauren had convinced him to borrow some money so they could make an impression during the wedding, and he admitted to having been misled by her. Everyone had a lot to say, but we just patiently waited to hear the reason why his apology was coming when it did. He said that he was telling Lauren that morning that once the money he had inherited was paid, it would be used to offset the debt, some of it, and they would be left with basically nothing. The whole thing did not sit well with Lauren, who had her eyes fixed on material things, and she immediately told him that she was done wasting her life with him, and that was why she had left. He had gone after her for the sake of the baby they were expecting, but she told him the pregnancy was a lie, just as I suspected. My mom, Sandra, and I had no form of sympathy towards William, even though he was back to the 0 point of his life. If the tables were turned, he would have treated us without mercy. I know of it. Just look at how he's behaved when he knew that the woman whom he called mother all his life was his aunt. How do you think that he would have related to us if he got the house and we got nothing? I kicked him out of the home without wasting my time. My family's carried on with their lives, and it feels good to be, the independent couple gone. William and Lauren were completely out of control. First of all, William was not even related to OP's family, yet he thought he was entitled to it, but the one that gets me tripped up is Lauren. She's literally not a part of this family at all. Only thing tying her together to this inheritance money was her soon-to-be husband. I mean, guys, come on. Lauren was the most toxic character I've seen in some time. Let me know your thoughts about this inheritance drama. Drop your comments down below. Thank you for joining me on today's video. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every day. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya!